we're on a new tack because we have someone saying, the text says, someone says. So now, the wrong person, the person who's in the wrong, puts something together wrong. We know that because it's read. But it looks right, doesn't it? Maybe when you read it. When I read it yesterday, I thought, this is right. What's wrong about it? Proponents of the middle with complete analysis of the view also ascertain, with an awareness ascertaining external and internal things as dependent arising, that those are empty. Right? What's wrong about it? And even the glorious leader here, Jeffrey, was thinking, that looks right. I wrote the thing. So, forgetful me. Because, and then the reason is right, because fortunately I, found out what's wrong and what's right, and made this blue. There's a way that emptiness dawns at me of been arising to those persons. Those persons are who have completed analysis of the view, who've realized emptiness. So then as you read down, you say, it's not the same consciousness. It's that the one leads to another consciousness. So this blue one does not entail the red one, right? Now, if you haven't prepared a little for this, for our meeting today, you'll have to pause over the entail sentence, the entail clause. Because, and I'm jumping to the because I don't want to bore those who have prepared, but I also don't want to punish those who haven't prepared. So, what does it mean that emptiness, because that emptiness dawns as the meaning of dependent arising to proponents of the middle who have completed analysis of the view, means that through the power of this awareness, ascertaining dependent arising, great emptiness regarding, great ascertainment regarding emptiness is generated. So there's, as our precious abbot said last time, you get one, and then that gives you the power for the next realization. So there's a two-step process, and that's what Tsongkhapa says in the middle of the quote. Okay, can you jump down to the middle? I don't want to go too fast. They, in dependence on the power of just that awareness, will ascertain. You see, will ascertain this as meaning that things are empty of inherent existence. and then coming, no, it's not out at the margin. If it were out at the margin, it would mean that Jeffrey was speaking. Rather, who is speaking? It's, what? Giant Shiba's chief student, Ngag-wang-tra-shi. Who's like slowing everything down. Slowing everything down. Or slowing it down may confuse you. You know, you you have to slow it down. This quote, Tsongkhapa's quote, entails you get down to the because clause in the last two lines, because it says, in dependence upon the power of that awareness. It doesn't say ascertain with that awareness. So that's the problem with that initial red statement, that looked to me as if it was okay. And I can go back up at the top and reread it. And see the problem with that red statement. It's as if the mind that ascertains dependent arising, it itself ascertains emptiness. Well, no. That one that ascertains dependent arising provides the power for just subsequently ascertaining emptiness. Also, someone says, this leads to the final step. Now, why are we looking into Ngag-wang-tra-shi's exposition? It's because Zha-mar Gen-dün-tan-dzin-gya-tsho thinks it's a very good exposition. He wants to use it in his own exposition until this point. Until Ngag-wang-tra-shi's response. Of course, until what unfolds in Ngag-wang-tra-shi's response to this person's wrong point. So we have to be on our toes here. Wrong begetting wrong, according to Zha-mar Gen-dün-tan-dzin-gya-tsho. And, okay? Not okay, but unless you've read through it all and understood Zha-mar's point. So, we have this very pithy comment. The three, emptiness, dependent arising, and middle path, have the same meaning, which not only the wrong person, but Ngag-wang-tra-shi pretty much says the same thing, but with a slight change. Tsongkhapa says pretty much the same thing. Chandrakirti says pretty much the same thing. Nagarjuna says pretty much the same thing. And most everybody's flipped out by this. So now we're getting into a difficult quote, as Nagarjuna says. I reformed my translation of this for the sake of not in this printing of this stanza to follow the Tibetan reading of it. Supreme, by speaking of emptiness, dependent arising, and the middle path as having the same meaning, to the unequaled Buddha, homage. It's kind of, you have to read it a few times to figure out how to put the English together. Whereas if you put the last line first, homage to the unequaled Buddha, supreme, who is supreme, by speaking of emptiness, dependent arising, and the middle path as having the same meaning. That's how I originally translated it. A little easier to understand. I mean, but I wanted the word order to follow the Tibetan, which is as hard to read as the English is. Once you get it. Supreme goes with Buddha in the last line. Supreme, by speaking of emptiness, dependent arising in the middle path as having the same meaning. To that unequaled Buddha, homage. Okay, homage is the last word. Now, in terms of meaning, the hard thing to understand is how could emptiness and dependent arising have the same meaning? How could the middle path, how could these three have the same meaning? Ngag-wang-tra-shi comes up with an explanation of Nagarjuna's statement, comes up with one, makes up one. And that's what's going to bother Zha-mar Gen-dün-tan-dzin-gya-tsho. But first, let us understand what the brilliant Ngag-wang-tra-shi, he said, well, you shouldn't have said same meaning, you should have said similar. Okay, that's how you want to see it. This could make sense. So he made up three things. We've got three things: emptiness, dependent arising, and middle path. So he took emptiness as meaning phenomenon that is solely empty of true establishment, or inherent existence, or any of those terms. Well, that's kind of clever. Instead of saying emptiness, he turned it into phenomenon that is emptiness. That's pretty clever. And then you could leave dependent arising as it is, because everything's a dependent arising. Even emptiness is dependent arising, but phenomenon that is empty. Okay, those two, you could see whatever is dependent arising is a phenomenon that is solely empty of true establishment. Whatever is a phenomenon that is solely empty of true establishment is a dependent arising. And then for middle path, he made that into that which is empty of true establishment, free from the two extremes, called the middle path. free from the two extremes called the middle path. Actually, what's called the middle path? Freedom from the two extremes, that's called the middle path? Or that which is empty of true establishment? I actually don't know. I don't know if it makes any difference. Middle path, that's between the two extremes on the safe land. And Ngag-wang-tra-shi says, for this is in accordance with the statement of the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. In other words, he expects us to be able to put the meaning of the Heart Sutra together based on what he's just said. That if you just took form is emptiness, emptiness is form, at face value, that would be nonsense. So emptiness would be phenomenon that is solely empty of true establishment, and form would be a dependent arising. That's what form is emptiness, emptiness is form means. Now, in Zha-mar Gen-dün-tan-dzin-gya-tsho's, it's very well put. But first he explains what Ngag-wang-tra-shi is saying through 5 points, and I'll just introduce what he says. He says, he criticizes, or he tweaks, I call it. Ngag-wang-tra-shi shouldn't have said just similar. You said exactly the same, or they're equivalent. All three of these are equivalent. He should have used a stronger word than similar. When you read on preparing for next time, he says, you shouldn't have used a weak term, Ngag-wang-tra-shi, like similar. You should have said equivalent. And he makes it even stronger. You'll see it. You'll see it when you get to all 5. He says, if you scroll down, it's not just strictly equivalent. It's don't you mean synonymous equivalence? This is the strongest way of saying all three. And he said, this is what you should have, this is what you really meant. All three, right? All of these, if it's one of them, it's all three. Now, he's not trapping him. He's just saying, this is what you really meant. And then he's going to say, you missed the boat. All right. See you next time.